Welcome to the last of 4 June 7th, 2022 primary candidate election forums, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Santa Fe County and the Santa Fe New Mexican. I am Kelly Davis, Vice President of Voter Services. The forum tonight will be for the New Mexico State Representatives District 46. We appreciate the City of Santa Fe making available the Chavez Community Center for this forum. For those of you who are present, the League's voter guide, along with other voter information materials, are on the table at the entrance to the room over there. You can also access the guide online at lwvsfc.org. In addition, you can see your ballot, state races, and other 2022 primary election information at vote411.org. And now it's time I will turn this over to your moderator, Irene Epp. Irene?
Good evening. Thank you very much for attending the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum. My name is Irene Epp, and I'm serving as the moderator this evening. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Santa Fe County, I first want to express our gratitude to the Santa Fe New Mexican, who is broadcasting our City of Santa Fe candidate forums this year as a service to the community. The New Mexicans' no strings attached support over the years has allowed the League to provide nonpartisan, authoritative election information to thousands of Santa Fe County voters by publishing our voter guide and now by live streaming our candidate forums. I'd like to start by introducing the candidates for tonight's forum and just give a gentle reminder that these forums are designed for voter information from all points of view, all sides, and there is, by custom, no audience reaction during the forum. Everybody has a voice, everybody is heard, but it's not like a performance. So everybody listens, and we don't normally have an audience reaction at the end. Will we have something at the very end of the forum? You betcha. To appreciate all that these brave souls have done in risking everything. They're sitting up in front of you. It's not an easy task. And we're very glad to see such a good turnout. It's quite great to see you. I'd like to again start by introducing the candidates. Starting on the left, as candidates for the New Mexico State Representatives District 46, directly beside me is Andrea Romero. Next to Andrea Romero is Henry Roybal. And next to Henry Roybal is Jay Grossclose. These are the three candidates for District 46. All of these candidates have agreed before the forum to follow the League protocols for candidate forums this evening. That means they're all prepared to obey the time limits. They'll all be starting with a 2-minute introduction, and they'll all be taking 2 minutes. We have a timekeeper also to give them a gentle and silent reminder. We'll begin with, They will also be practicing civil conversation. And I had the privilege of moderating one forum last week, and they were award-winning in the candidates' ability to disagree pointedly and talk civilly with one another, even when they disagreed on the issues. We're going to begin tonight with 2-minute opening statements from the candidates. Then we're going to ask them a series of questions submitted by you right here in the audience. There are also questions that will be submitted online. The candidates will answer every question, all of them, in rotating order, as many questions as we have time for. Finally, at the end, we'll conclude with 2-minute closing statements from the candidates in reverse order from their opening statements. If you haven't submitted questions yet, both for folks who are Zooming in to this event and also those of you who are present here at the Chavez Center, you can email questions if you're online. If you're right here in the forum, there are members of the League of Women Voters who will collect questions from you. If you get inspired and want to ask a question during the forum, just write it on the card that you have, and somebody will come and pick it up, and we're glad to cover that question as well. The questions we asked tonight have been selected by a special screening panel. They're right here in front of you, over here, not right in front of you, they're kind of in the corner over here. You can see them. That's our screening panel. They will be looking at the questions. If there are questions that duplicate one another, they'll consolidate them into one question so we can cover the maximum number of topics. They also will look at questions that are addressed to just one specific candidate. Like if one were addressed to me, Irene, they won't be using that question that's addressed only to one candidate. They also, of course, will not be submitting questions that contain any kind of personal attack or rudeness. I'll be giving the candidates a time of 2 minutes or less for their answers, and they've agreed to respect those limits. Our timekeeper, Diana Thatcher, is sitting right here in the front row. She has discs, a yellow disc for your time's almost up, 30 seconds, and a red stop disc that says you've used up your 2 minutes. I'm a kindly soul, but we will stop the candidates after 2 minutes so that we can do the maximum number of questions and we can be absolutely fair. We will begin now with 2-minute opening statements by the candidates, and I will address them as candidate, and then I'll use their last name because it's more formal. And we are going to hear first from candidate Romero. Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. Buenas noches, buenas tardes. I'm Representative Andrea Romero. I've had the honor of serving for the past 4 years in the New Mexico State House of Representatives. I'm a child of the Pojoaque and Espanola Valleys. I grew up here. This is my home. In fact, I even attended church in this room for a couple seasons while I was a child. I'm from Santa Fe, of course, in the Norte. So hello, Norteños. I'm glad to have you joining us this evening. I grew up here, went to Pinon Elementary, just across Rodeo Road, Capshaw, and then Santa Fe High School. When I was about 9 years old, my parents decided to divorce, and my mom moved us up into Espanola, where she could afford to live as a newly single mother. And with my brother and I in tow, and my older brother just joining the military, we basically were starting a new life in the Norte. And from that moment, I fell in love with the valley, had an incredible experience, of course, childhood growing up in Espanola, Pojoaque, Nambe, La Mesilla, and Chimayo, where my step parents are from. So it's been a long journey back and forth throughout the Norte to Santa Fe, which is perfect because our district runs from the city of Santa Fe all the way through the city of Espanola. And the challenges are significant. We talk about single-parent families and those that are struggling to make ends meet, especially with now uncontrollable inflation and rising prices. In our state house, I've been very honored and privileged to be able to work on legislation to help putting money back in the pockets of New Mexicans. With that, we still have more work to do when it comes to fighting climate change, protecting our water, improving housing opportunities, and protecting and codifying our reproductive health rights into law. I want to keep up the fight, and I'm excited for the challenge ongoing, but we've gone so far in the past 4 years, and I want to continue to build upon the great work that we've already done and hope to continue to see these things come to fruition as it has today.
Thank you, Candidate Romero. Candidate Roybal.
Thank you. My name is Henry Roybal. I grew up in the Pojoaque Valley. My family has lived there for the last 13 generations. We have had a lot of success in the valley with irrigation, ranching, and you know, we want to keep those traditions alive. I went to school at Northern New Mexico College, and my parents actually moved to California right before my father was shipped to Vietnam, and so he was drafted and went to Vietnam, and so he spent some time there. We moved back to the valley when I was 5 years old and lived there ever since. We do have a lot of issues that we're working on in the area, you know, with affordable housing. And so, you know, it's been a great challenge. I've been the county commissioner for Santa Fe County, served in the same district for the last 8 years. And so now I've decided to move into the next, my next position, so I've decided to run for New Mexico State Representative. We have had a lot of success. We've had a lot of resolutions, and we've worked hard to make sure that we champion renewable energy at the county. We have great staff there, and we've done a lot of work. We do have some resolutions that we passed recently, even for small businesses in the area. We had actually in New Mexico, we have 1,700 in unincorporated areas, and we work hard to work with our communities, and I just want to keep that work going and stay working for our district and for our communities. And it's been an honor to serve, and I look forward to continue serving at the next level. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Roybal. Candidate Grosclose.
Hi, I'm Jay Grosclose. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this event. I think it's very needed in our community to allow communication with the people who actually elect us. One of the things that I'd first like to make a point of is that I'm a civil engineer. I'm a New Mexico native. I'm intimately involved with the water resources in New Mexico throughout my career. I've lived in my district now for more than 40 years, and so I'm intimately familiar with the problems associated with that particular district. One of the major problems that I see in the way that the state is going right now has to do with how we are using our resources and how we are looking at new ones. Candidate Roybal mentioned the renewable energy resources. One thing that I want to make sure is that we do not experience the damage that renewable energy resources have caused in other areas where they have been implemented. In my career, we had a lot of experience with controlling saline runoff and bad water coming off of the lands. And one of the biggest problems we always had to deal with was endangered species and offsetting those concerns. And one of the things that I feel is very deficient in our existing laws is protections for the environment that we have. Now, that may sound kind of strange to you, but as a water resources engineer, I can tell you that the most important commodity that we have is water. I want to thank you again. There are other issues. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Grosclose. We'll now begin with the first question, and we're starting again with Andrea Romero. And the first question is, why do you want this position, and what are your qualifications?
Thank you for the question. This position has been a passion of mine that has continued to grow and develop as I've been able to serve. For me, my background is in public policy. I, after leaving Santa Fe High School, got a international relations degree from Stanford University and just graduated from law school on Saturday. So it's been a long journey and filled with being able to also work in food security, which is one of the largest issues in our state, still facing families today. And worked at the International Food Policy Research Institute in Washington, D.C., came back to New Mexico in 2012 to serve. And that has been basically my path leading to working with entrepreneurs, working with those who are wanting to start up businesses, grow businesses, and see them thrive. I've sat on numerous boards around the state, including the Lannel Foundation. I sat on the Sustainable Santa Fe Commission. I've run different community development organizations. And basically where I found myself running for office after President Trump was elected was looking at making sure that we could hold the line on bad policies in our state. Not only have we done that, we continue to grow the opportunity in our state from providing free college to being able to create greater access to capital for businesses, so on and so forth. So my passion is really how is it that we can connect the opportunities that government has to offer and create access. As a kid here and growing up in Santa Fe and in the Norte, we didn't know government. We didn't know who were our representatives. So for me, it's very important that folks feel that they can get to know us, know what we have at stake for our future, and be able to create that relationship. And now with a law degree, I feel even more empowered to continue the fight in the legislature, understanding our laws and the rule of laws, and how to be able to continue to fight that effort and do what we can to protect our constitutional rights, our fundamental rights, and continue to bring them to fruition in our state.
Candidate Roybal, why do you want this position, and what are your qualifications?
I think with public service, it started with me at a very young age. I worked for the Santa Fe County Assessor's Office at the age of 21 and worked there for about 4 years. I had my first child, and so I went to a title company named Santa Fe Abstract. Worked there for another 4 years before I started my career at Los Alamos National Laboratory. You know, I think the biggest thing that, you know, when my kids were young, I started coaching. And before he knew it, I was elected to be the president of the Pojoaque Valley Little League, then the director of the Young American Football League, and also the athletic coordinator for Pojoaque Intermediate School. I also was the head coach for the junior high football team and assisted the varsity football team and baseball team. But at my young career at the assessor's office, I worked for a lady, a great leader. She was the assessor at the time. Her name was Mercy Quintana. And, you know, talking to her, she would always tell me, you should run for public office. You have a great will to do good for your constituents and for everybody that comes in here. You know, you're always very helpful and you're really open with your communities. And, you know, later on when I was coaching, one day I was standing on the field, and my assistant coach at the time was Joseph Talachi, and he was my assistant coach for the football team. And I told him, you know what, I'm really thinking about running for public office. I'm going to run for county commissioner. And he told me, you know, I'm going to run for governor. Let's do some great things for the community. And, you know, he ended up winning as governor for Pojoaque Pueblo. I ended up winning for commissioner. And so we moved forward since then, and we've done, you know, a great job. And that's where my position started, and that's how I want to continue to serve the community. I always try and go above and beyond for all my constituents. As many of them can attest, I always, well, if it's not the county that'll help, I'll call the state or the federal government to make sure we get things done for them. So just being open and willing to work. Thank you.
Candidate Gross-Close, why do you want this position, and what are your qualifications?
I want this position because I feel that New Mexico is at a critical juncture, and a lot of it involves around how New Mexico will appear in the future, and what are we going to do to address the concerns that we have now. I know a lot of us, for instance, are breathing part of the national forest right now, or what used to be the national forest. Our state needs to be involved more with the federal government in the management of these lands around here. And I think I'm qualified to do that. I was appointed by the Secretary of the Interior under both Democrat and Republican administrations to the adaptive management work group and the technical work group of the Colorado River for the Grand Canyon Recovery Act. And in those positions and stuff, I was involved a lot in the decisions on how we would proceed in the future on those things to protect those resources that we have. Now, also as serving as the engineer advisor to the Canadian River Compact, the Rio Grande Compact, and the Upper Colorado River Compact, at one time or another in my career, I've been exposed to the water systems throughout the state and the environment that poses. One of my main concerns is also how we are losing the educational opportunities that we have with the people that graduate. I want to see our graduates retained in this state for the betterment of this state.
Thank you. And we are now with our second question, which is kind of a follow-up. What are the 3 important issues you plan to work on if elected? What are the 3 important issues you plan to work on if elected? We're changing up the order all the time, so we're meticulously fair. And this question, Candidate Roybal, goes to you first. The 3 important issues you plan to work on.
I think the 3 important issues right now is crime. There's a lot of crime that we have, and we have to figure out. I know that there was some legislation that was brought forward in our last session, and it's still early to tell whether or not that's going to have substantial effect. If not, we have to continue to look and see what legislation we have to bring forward to make those changes. Affordable housing is another huge issue. Now that I'm, even before I was campaigning, it's been a huge issue, even in my district. When I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with, but they had the Amount water settlement. And when they had that, we actually, there was a certain amount of water that was awarded to the pueblos and a certain amount of water that was given to the non-pueblos. So, during that time, the state engineer looked at how many well permits were out there, and it was actually a right to divert 3 acre-feet, and it was a permit. And so what they did is they started adjudicating. They said we had too many wells in the basin now because of the allocations that they brought forward. So that actually, they closed the MPT basin, and now there's a lot of people that have 4 acres of land that they can't develop. I mean, those are all affordable housing in the sense that in our traditional communities, a lot of times parents that own 4 or 5 acres, they'll give half an acre or 3/4 an acre to their child to develop. So, affordable housing, and then we also have issues with water that ties in with that affordable housing because of the Amount water settlement. But I think that those are issues that we definitely need to work on. And we also have I guess the next one that I wanted to talk about was actually just, I'm out of time, but yeah, there's a few more issues, but I'm out of time, so.
Thank you. And candidate candidate Romero.
So we're just getting started. I still feel on so many pieces of legislation that I've been fighting for in the legislature, starting with housing. We've been trying to modernize our housing laws now since 2020 when the pandemic hit. We knew there was going to be an exacerbated crisis from what we were already experiencing with the housing shortage, not just here locally, but across the state and across the country. We're seeing rising housing prices everywhere. And that's hitting extremely close to home, where so many people want to live here, graduate college, graduate high school, and stay here, and they can't afford that. So tied with that is the affordability of housing and, of course, creating more access to housing. Unfortunately, in the last decade, we had not raised any new apartment buildings, new homes, et cetera, to meet the demand. So we're well behind on what we need to do. But now we just passed historic legislation that will create an access to an affordable housing fund over the next, in perpetuity through the Severance Tax Permanent Fund, at least $25 million a year for affordable housing. So we'll start seeing that money come through with the new fiscal year. I look forward to spending that directly on homes built here in our district. Two, tied with what we're seeing in our mountains, is climate change. And that's tied to our water resources, how we manage our forests, and what we want to do moving forward. I've purposed funds from our district toward the Water Data Act. So what we're seeing is, unfortunately, our water management in our state is archaic, and it's still on paper. We need to modernize our system so we know what we have. Currently, we don't even know what water resources we have, and the way we find out is through litigation, unfortunately. So I want to be able to bring a modernized system of water management to the state that the state is responsible for and to answer for all of these issues that are currently questions. Finally, we have more to do on education and continuing to grow our teacher programs, funding more education for students, and making sure that everyone gets the highest quality education here.
Thank you. Candidate Grosclose.
There's a number of issues that are very critical to us in the future, and we've all mentioned water. I won't talk much more about that, although that is absolutely the limiting feature in New Mexico's future. We've also got issues with mental health and what the state is doing to address the conditions of mental health. We've got drug addiction, we've got massive drug overdose. The fact is, I'm just appalled that New Mexico has 1 death from fentanyl every day in New Mexico. That is just incredible for me to be able to wrap my arms around that. A lot of that, and the homelessness issue, the people that are living under bridges, a lot of those issues are all involved around mental health issues, and our state is doing very little to nothing to really address many of those questions. So I want to bring those to the forefront. One of the other issues that we have that has been mentioned is affordable housing. There are models that are available. We're not totally unlike Breckenridge and Vail and Aspen when they were having the trouble with trying to house the people that needed to operate the facilities that all the visitors could go to. Well, believe it or not, Santa Fe has gotten just about that way. And so we have to accommodate that. We do have some models in place. We need to see expansions of those. One of the things that I am most concerned with, though, is a top-down governance. I believe that governance is best solved at the local level, as we had done with the regional water flooding system that was discarded for a statewide system. I think we need to make decisions at the local level, and the state should actually be the one assisting the local level to achieve the goals and the needs of each of their own districts. That goes for mine as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We're up to our next question, which has to do with economic development in New Mexico. And candidate Close, this will be directed to you. What legislative action would you support to stimulate economic development in New Mexico? What legislative action would you support to stimulate economic development in New Mexico?
One of the biggest and first issues that I'll bring up here is our tax system. Our punitive tax system really hurts the development of new enterprises and small businesses because of the way that it's taxed. People actually have to go out and pay the gross receipts tax before they are able to sell their product and do that. In many cases, for these small businesses and people that are just developing these concerns, they actually have to borrow the money to pay the state taxes to do that up front. That's an unfair system. It has been abandoned nearly entirely in the United States, except in New Mexico. That is one of the biggest things that we can do to help our economic development and to provide more jobs. Now, we've got a whole lot of jobs that were destroyed during the COVID epidemic, and also the businesses that were lost in this. We need to really address the issue of trying to find jobs and getting people back to work. And so that's why economic development is so important. One of the things that hurts our state in a lot of cases is the brain drain we have. We have excellent institutions. I'm a graduate of New Mexico State University. My first job was in Kansas City because I couldn't find a job in New Mexico. And as I look around, I see kids coming out that want to stay in New Mexico. I see them want to do something besides a menial job, stocker at the supermarket or something like that. And we're not providing the technical education that they need. I think we need vocational technical stuff at the high school level rather than forcing people into junior colleges to get that. I think a kid going to high school should be able to graduate from high school with a certificate in carpentry or whatever, and that will help hold them within the state and give them an opportunity for a future. Thank you.
Okay, and now we are to candidate Romero. Legislative action to stimulate the economic development.
Well, New Mexico's economy is still primarily based in oil and gas, and that's what generates the largest amount of funding for our state still. So economic development is top priority for how we diversify our state and obviously figure out how to get out of these boom and bust cycles where we have money and we don't. One of those great opportunities was in legalizing cannabis. I was very proud to co-sponsor that legislation and bring hundreds of millions of dollars into our state. In our first month alone, $22 million in brand new revenue that have never been here before. We need to be creative about how we do that. That also helps us undo the harms of the war on drugs. So when we look at how we're able to help those New Mexicans that have the right cultural fit, that have the right sustainability fit for what kind of business we want to grow here, we need to have foundational resources to do that. Broadband will allow us to grow our film industry more. It'll allow us to grow the tech industry more. These are great fits for the culture and landscape of New Mexico. In addition to that, I'm looking at how we might be able to grow our creative economies more. Of course, Santa Fe is filled with artistic entrepreneurs everywhere. How do we get them to a market that we can access internationally? And of course, our outdoor recreation market. We now have an Office of Outdoor Recreation that we founded while I've been in the legislature. We have so many opportunities to create better trails, better walkways, access to our rivers, and to be able to create that nexus between recreation and opportunity. But the key is how we continue to grow and diversify. When we look at the opportunity with legalized cannabis, we need about 10 more of those in order to get out of the boom and bust cycles with oil and gas. So when we think about what we can do creatively and how we reinvest into our state and into our entrepreneurs here, that's where we want to purpose that money. With the new revenues coming from cannabis, for instance, we can invest in mental health, into helping our law enforcement train better, and of course into new entrepreneurs for an equitable market that allows for that access.
Thank you. Our next question comes back to you, Candidate Romero, and it's on a different topic. This topic is lobbyists. What do you see as the role of the lobbyist? What is the appropriate relationship for a representative to have with lobbyists?
That is a great question.
I'm so sorry, Candidate Roybal. I'm a bad moderator. Oh, boo. Here we go. I would like to ask you, what legislative action would you support to stimulate economic development in New Mexico? Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have the tax, the way that our tax is structured right now, we have a lot of contractors that we can't compete with our neighboring states because of the fact that the tax structure is so bad at this point. And it's something that they've worked on already and tried to fix, but that's something that I would want to look at and try and move forward and trying to fix that. I know it's something that it has been looked at the past. The other thing is, even this morning, President Biden announced that he's going to have the largest initiative for affordable housing in the state, and that's something that I think is really important. I think that I know a lot of the way that typically works from the federal government when it comes down is we have to find matching funds, like what they did with broadband and Medicare when they brought that and they expanded it. And so I would definitely advocate to make sure that we got additional funding and made sure that we had the match for the state so that we can work forward with that, because that will actually help with economic development, and then supporting our unions. Our small businesses, like I said, I just brought forward a resolution about 2 weeks ago for small businesses at the county, and it passed unanimously because the commission knows what small businesses bring to our economy. I mean, that's where we really build and diversify the income here in the state. I mean, and so entrepreneurship is really huge for us in the state, and that's something that I would definitely work on trying to get additional funding and legislate and some, just additional funding and working with the community and listening to what their needs are. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Roybal. We're back to lobbyists. What do you see as the role of the lobbyist? What is the appropriate relationship for a representative to have with lobbyists?
So in today's New Mexico legislature, we are an unpaid part-time citizen legislature. It's the only one in the nation. So when you look at the unfair advantage of lobbyists in our state is that they are the paid people who get to be there constantly, looking down for people and targeting them for whatever, role that they want to ask those legislators to play in different pieces of legislation. So right now, I think the role of lobbyists really outstands their place, and at least where we should be legislatively, with what the people, I think, need to have a voice in. What I've been doing in the legislature through all that time is ensuring that I am well away with an arm's length away from lobbyists that are completely in disagreement with the role that I believe that they should play. For me, I want to study the legislation, I want to read it, I want to understand it. Often legislators call upon lobbyists for information. It's not objective. So for me, being able to find objective information regarding each of the laws that we seek to put into play is my job. And we really need to reform the system overall of how it is that we govern our legislature in the state in order to ensure that the people have the power well above the lobbyists that currently have the access. And that will happen with a paid legislature, with a full-time legislature. And so that will help us to understand what this state needs to move forward and not allow the lobbyists to speak on our behalf or have an outsized judgment in the legislation that we will be working on. When we're in a 60 or 30-day session, it's rapid fire, and you're trying to get this information as quickly as possible. And unfortunately, a lot of legislators rely upon the advice of lobbyists to make their votes, and I am not that legislator. I love to listen, and of course I'll create access for everyone, but I will not allow a lobbyist to sway my vote.
Thank you. Candidate Roybal.
Thank you.
What do you see as the role of the lobbyist, and what's the appropriate relationship for a representative to have with lobbyists?
From my understanding and everything that I've seen at the state is lobbyists, they do come in, and of course they advocate for whoever they're working for, and so they try and push that initiative on to the elected officials that are the decision makers and the lawmakers. And I think that lobbyists, I think that it would be good if legislators were paid, but I'm here to represent my community and work for my community, and I don't need to be paid to do that because I have a job, and I have a full-time job, and I make a good salary, and so I don't need to be paid to do that. But I think that lobbyists, if they're bringing forward information that we could look at and study to make informed decisions, that's really what their role should be. It shouldn't be trying to convince the representatives or senators to vote in a certain way by pressuring them or anything else. So I think really a lobbyist should be there just to give you information about what they're bringing forward and how that's going to actually help your community and benefit your community. Thank you.
Thank you. And Candidate Gross-Close, what do you see as the role of the lobbyist, and what's appropriate?
I'll be a little bit different here. I think the role of the lobbyist is a very important position to a legislator or to anyone in a government position because they do represent certain amounts of interest. Now, at that time, or at the time that I'm saying that, I will also say that does not excuse a legislator for not reaching out and touching the grassroots for how they feel about those issues and everything there. So it kind of goes both ways. One of it is an easy source of information. That gives the legislature more time to be able to develop close contacts within their communities, is the way I feel about it. There are many of the lobbyist positions that do come out that definitely are tilted to one direction, and sometimes those have to be adjusted. I feel that the objective understanding of what is being attempted, when a lobbyist is coming in, they're coming in with a specific piece of legislation in mind. And so I think it's incumbent on the legislator to inform themselves fully of all the issues, and that includes reaching out to the grassroots level. I can't reiterate enough my belief that governance should originate at the grassroots level in every case, and any legislator who does not attempt to reach into the grassroots level is not doing their job. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll have one more question, and then we're going to go into a very brief break. This next question, again, is on a different topic, and we do have some questions that we're identifying as submitted by youth in our community, by young people who are just starting to vote and getting started out. And this is from a youth in Santa Fe, and it's on gun control. How do you feel about enforcing stricter gun laws to reduce violence and crime? And this question, to I didn't leave anybody out. No, okay. Now I'm worried. This question goes first to candidate Romero. How do you feel about enforcing stricter gun laws?
Thank you. In the past 2 terms, I've been honored to vote on legislation that creates greater gun safety mechanisms for our communities. As we know, gun violence in our community just south of here in Albuquerque is out of control, and folks feel unsafe. So with common sense legislation like universal background checks and those that can do emergency calls for basically a red flag law for those that should not have access to a gun, those that are violent domestic offenders should not have access to a gun. We've passed all of that legislation in the past 4 years. So I'm very proud to have the Moms Demand Action endorsement, being a strong gun safety legislator and being able to continue that effort. We still have more to do on gun safety, and as we know, with access, with the crime laws that we passed, those that are bringing guns into crime-related situations are going to do more time now in our state. So these are very strong laws that we're trying to continue to improve. And for me, the roots of these causes of crime is where really I'm trying to put our greatest effort. When you look at the poverty, when you look at the economics, the access to education, with improvements there, we see that there is no need for an access to a gun to use it violently. And that's the type of legislation that I continue to support and move forward. And those are the types of things that undoes the roots of crime. Mental health access as well. We've had to, unfortunately, continue to rebuild our mental health facilities in the state after our previous governor, Susana Martinez, obliterated them in 2014 and sent them all out of state. So having to rebuild that enterprise helps us create a safer community overall as well. But we're not there yet. We have more to do, and so we're going to have to continue the effort of creating safer communities, undoing the root causes of crime to create safer communities, and of course protect our Second Amendment rights and other things that we still have on the books, but create safer communities in the process.
Candidate Roybal, how do you feel about enforcing stricter gun laws to reduce violence and crime?
As far as stricter gun laws, I think that, education is going to be one of the biggest parts of the whole problem with guns and accidental shootings. And as far as violent crimes, I mean, it should only be law-abiding citizens that should have access to firearms. And getting to where we can only have law-abiding citizens having that access is a challenge that I think that we need to work on, and I think that we can bring some bills forward through the legislature to bring more gun laws as far as those types of violent crimes that are happening. And I think that more than anything, I think that education, it's part of our Second Amendment, and I think that, a lot of people go hunting, they go target practicing, competition, so, it's something that, of course, I think law-abiding citizens should have the right to possess firearms and to own firearms, but somehow we have to get to the point where we don't have those firearms in people's hands that commit violent crimes and that aren't a law-abiding citizens. So, yeah, I think we have to get there, and there's a lot of different safety rules that we have to bring, but I still think that education is going to be a big part of that. I think there's a lot of accidental shootings and things of that nature, so I think that there is a lot that we have to work on. Thank you.
And candidate Grosclose, how do you feel about enforcing stricter gun laws to reduce violence and crime?
I believe adamantly that criminals should not have guns. And one thing that we see continually in this state is a criminal with a gun. There are a number of reasons for that. There needs to be firearm enhancements on criminal activities. We're not doing that. Bills have been introduced in the last few legislatures, I know for sure, that have not been enacted. And I think this problem, or the problem with mental health on some of the issues here, extends quite a bit earlier than the Susana Martinez administration. The reduction of mental health services and that sort of thing has degenerated over, I would say generations from what it used to do. And so it crosses party lines in every sense when you're talking about those mental health issues. Now, one of the things that I think that we can't do is to obliterate the rights of New Mexicans. Our Constitution is unlike the federal Constitution. It gives us the right to protect ourselves and property with a weapon. It gives us the opportunity to use firearms for sporting purposes, for hunting. And one of the things that I find in many cases is that they're restricting the law-abiding citizen. Having a citizen who's trying to protect his household lock up a gun, I have not known a criminal who will wait at the door until that law-abiding citizen can unlock their safe and take their trigger guard off. They're going to come in and they're going to do that. And that has happened more and more in recent years. I see that as a problem, that we often aim our laws at the law-abiding citizens instead of the people who perpetuate the crimes. And that's where we've got to really address our attention.
Thank you. And that brings us to what will be about a 2-minute stretch and a break. Thank you very much for being such an attentive audience. We appreciate that. And brave candidates, you have 2 minutes to breathe. Okay. And we are ready for the next question. And this question is, I'll start with the two candidates are here. We'll have three candidates, I am sure, in a matter of seconds. How can the legislature balance the needs of farmers and ranchers with the priorities of the cities and the towns? And this question is going to go first to candidate Grosclose. How can the legislature balance the needs of farmers and ranchers with the priorities of the cities and towns?
Let me just start off first with saying that people in cities and towns have to eat. That starts on farms and ranches. And so one of the issues I think driving this question is the question of water. A lot of the freshwater sources in this state are utilized in irrigated agriculture. I believe, we tried one initiative I was appointed to start under one of the administrations, and it didn't go very far, with trying to address the issue of conserved water and how that could address future water demands. In the Colorado River Basin, we did quite a bit to conserve water, to decrease losses on irrigation systems. And irrigation systems, they were developed in older times before we had equipment, before we had management techniques that we have now. Our NRCS is very capable in this. What happens is the expense to do it. In the Colorado River Basin, we had power generation funds in order to cost share with the agriculture interest to conserve and make them more efficient in their water use. New Mexico needs a similar sort of system. Now, New Mexico does have a water fund. The last legislature tried to take money from that water fund for housing. That is wrong, and that is not something that is very bright, is my frank opinion. So we're going to have to do that. We're going to have to deal with that. We can deal with that. There's quite a bit of water that could be available through conservation efforts. We have to solve the issue of ownership of the conserved water. Thank you.
This question goes next to candidate Romero. How can the legislature balance the needs of farmers and ranchers with the priorities of the cities and towns?
Well, in our House District 46, again, going from the city of Santa Fe all the way through the Pojoaque Valley into the city of Espanola, and 4 sovereign pueblos with Nambe, Tesuque, Pojoaque, and San Ildefonso, we are a microcosm of all of New Mexico. So when you look at urban and rural, that they're basically all of those issues are our issues in the state legislature. So you absolutely have to be on board with what is going on across the state in order to know what's going on in our district. So in balancing the needs of our farmers and ranchers, I've worked with our Acequia communities. The Acequia community, basically, we were able to codify a fund, $2.5 million a year, to fund infrastructure planning and all of the needs that an Acequia would need to make sure that we can maintain our traditional communities. We were able to get 1% of funding for our land grant communities to be able to continue to thrive. It's the first time we've ever had access to capital for these communities that have always been in need. When I look at what we can do with capital outlay and other opportunities, I've always given to our acequias and prioritized that as far as how it is that we can give equitably across our district, and that is always a top concern of mine. So when you look at balancing the needs, I, as a former farmer working abroad and, of course, ostrich ranching here in the state, they're the hardest working people there are when you look at what it is that they do to help us feed our families and get food on the table. So what we can do to support them is, of course, provide the resources that they need to stay up and running. Access to water, when we look at how it is that we're building infrastructure, and we have historic records of purposing funding for infrastructure, that helps our farming and ranching communities. And what we can do to continue to support them is how it is that we make choices as urban residents and what we eat and how we decide what we want to buy locally, and we can incentivize all of that, even at the state level, for how it is that we want to support these enterprises locally as well.
Thank you. And candidate Roybal.
Thank you. I think that, water is really important. I go out to a lot of our acequias, and there's an unbelievable amount of acequias out there from one to, from all the way from Tesuque, all the way to Santa Cruz and Espanol. There's acequias and mordomos that call me all the time and ask for services from the county. And, as it is right now with the anti-donation clause, I explain to them that we can't help with, like, culverts and cement, but we can help with dirt work, in-kind donations. And it's something that, unless you get out to the communities, you don't know what the needs are. And it's something that I've talked to some acequias and, some of the mordomos and the presidents of some of the boards, and some of them don't even realize that there's funding out there that's available. So, the thing is that we have to figure out a way that our farmers can bring their product to the tables, and we do that at the county. We have a lot of initiatives we brought forward where we're putting farmers in contact with grocery stores, with restaurants, and helping drive that. So I think it's made a huge difference. But I think that the biggest thing is getting out there and making sure that they know that these services are available. Like I said, there's a lot of acequias that didn't even know until I let them know that they have these services that are there available for them. And so I think that's one thing that we have to look at, and we still need to try and get even more funding for these acequias, because I know a lot of our acequias are in poor condition. I've gone out to visit a lot of these acequias, and they have a huge need, and that's the only way we can keep going with our traditional values and keep ranching, keep farming. And it's something that's near and dear to my heart, because it's something that I still do. I still have livestock, I still plant gardens, and it's something that is a huge need. So I know that we're working with the pueblos as well, and so thank you.
Thank you. Before the next question, I just wanted to remind folks that we have, and we're particularly happy about this evening, we have two Democratic candidates running in the Democratic primary. That would be candidate Romero and candidate Roybal, and we have one candidate running in the Republican primary, and that is candidate Gross-Close. Just to remind you that we have both parties represented, which is our democracy. The next question, which will begin with candidate Romero, has to do with child care. What can the state legislature do to address the need for child care in New Mexico? What can the state legislature do to address the need for child care in New Mexico?
So our governor just codified into law 1 year of access to child care, and that's so historic for what it is Democrats can do when Democrats are elected to office. I've been honored to finally created an opportunity of access to the people of New Mexico to invest in early childhood education. That's going to be on the ballot this November, to be able to take 1.25% of our permanent fund for the first time and invest it into early childhood education. When we look at investing in our youngest, that is our future of New Mexico. And when you think about child care and the continuum of care that a child needs for being able to create that access to education and otherwise, this is historic. We would be the first state in the nation to do that. And it's been an honor to be able to fight for that. We didn't get through that my first term, but we did our second term with the changes in our Senate. So I want to continue to create that access. With only 1 year down the pipe for what we see the governor doing today, we want to continue and grow that. We've given historic childhood tax credits for families who are trying to make ends meet and find access to childcare. These subsidies work, and we know that parents are using them to really help make sure that they can get through paycheck to paycheck and fund that access. But we need more childcare workers as well. So when we look at our education system and all of the opportunities that we have, we are hiring like crazy in all of these sectors. So we need to train folks who are passionate about early childhood education all the way across the spectrum to our teaching enterprises and beyond. So we'll continue that work, but when we think about what that also means for those who can reproduce, is creating access to health care as well, so that family planning is always an option in our state, that everyone can access health care affordably. When it comes to child care too, you want to keep your children healthy and safe, and that goes across the board with their parents as well.
And the next one will be candidate Roybal. What can the state legislature do to address the need for childcare in New Mexico?
You know, I do know that there was some funding appropriated at the state level, and there again, I mean, it really comes down to working with the local governments and make sure we disseminate that information to the availability, and our local governments will work with the state to make sure that we can help utilize those funds through community services and different programs that the counties and the cities have. And I think the biggest thing is making sure that we get that information disseminated to our constituents. You know, I had our county clerk call me and say, hey, did you hear about this funding that they have? You know, I'd like to see what the county can do to incentivize that for our employees. And, you know, I think it's something that, you know, we have to realize that this is where we build a foundation for our children and their future. It's where we help them to start realizing their dreams and help them to grow in that way. I mean, I've raised 4 children. Actually, 3 of them are already adults, and I have 1 5-year-old that we're raising now. And you know, we want to make sure that we have that to build a foundation for these children. So I really think that we need to even appropriate more funding. And I know that with oil and gas, they do give quite a bit of that funding to education. So I think that it's just important that we look at how much funding is going into the education program, take care of our teachers, and make sure that we build that foundation for our children, for our future generations. Thank you.
And candidate Close, what can the state legislature do to address the need for childcare in New Mexico?
I want to start this off with just an observation. Back when I was growing up, yes, I have lighter colored hair, but there was not as much of a demand for childcare because the tax structure in this country was such that people could survive, that families could survive on basically one income or maybe another part-time income. The whole problem that I see with this whole child care issue really, and it is a dilemma, that the whole problem that I see is that we have built a system that required people to hold more jobs, some of them 3 or 4. I know people with 4 jobs, in order to try to provide for their families and stuff. And that is a real critical deficiency in the way our government has gone for the last at least 50 years, is what I would guess. So the best thing that we could do at addressing child care would be to reduce the tax burden on families. And but at the same time, yes, I know that there are issues and needs that are out there, but I still, once again, want to reiterate that I think that those issues are best identified at the local level and supported by the state. I do not believe that we should be in a state-down mode to try to do this. And use of the permanent fund, I'm against that. Those permanent funds were set up so that at some point in the future, when we no longer have oil and gas revenues, the state government could operate on the interest from those funds. And when we take those funds out of the corpus, we're damaging the future, not only for ourselves, but for our children. Thank you.
We're now going to the other end of the spectrum to speak a bit about senior citizens in our county. And this first question will go first to candidate Roybal. The question is, what are your ideas for ways the state of New Mexico can better support our senior population?
Thank you. I work pretty closely with community services at the county. That's one of my passions. I'll go out to the different senior centers and work, go and talk to them, see what their needs are. I mean, more than anything, we have to rely on staff sometimes to disseminate information to the elected officials or to the directors of their organizations. But I think that as an elected official, it's imperative that you get out there and you talk to your constituency and see what their needs are. So many times I've been out to some of the areas, and I have, in my district, I actually have the most senior centers in the area. And now in the future, we have to take care of our seniors because, a lot of our baby boomers are retiring, and we're going to have a huge need. I mean, both with our fire departments, our emergency response. And so it's something that we need to prepare for. So we need to make sure that we bookmark the funding necessary to take care of our senior citizens. We've done quite a few projects in a lot of the areas, and in my area, a lot of the senior centers are old schools that they transformed into senior centers. And a lot of them, we're constantly trying to keep up with maintenance and trying to make sure they're ADA compliant. And I mean, there's just a huge need for our senior citizens, and we need to make sure that we're ready for that because right now we're going to have a lot more retiring workforce that are going to be home and need these services. So it's something that we really need to focus on, and we need to make sure that we have adequate funding and look at that, prepare for the future. I hate to be one that, I want to be proactive, not reactive. We need to get there now and be prepared. So that's one thing that I would work on to make sure that we had adequate funding for our seniors. Thank you.
Thank you. This question?
May I go?
Okay. This question?
Wait, I haven't responded yet. May I go?
I think it has just been candidate Roybal.
Oh, for the senior
citizens.
Oh, okay. Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
So,
who's next?
Candidate Romero.
Our elders, the elders of our community and throughout our district are sacred. They are the foundation of everything that I know I've learned as far as what it's like growing up generations in New Mexico. My grandparents were subsistence farmers up in Taos. My grandmother, hailing from Mora, moving to Santa Fe, became a teacher's aide early on, and we've learned so much about that. My great-grandmother used to run the Santa Fe Public Schools cafeteria, and we had the best Frito pies in all of Santa Fe. And so, what we have to be able to maintain and ensure in our community as far as senior citizens go is making sure they have high quality access to health care. And right now, because of many of our shortages from nurses to doctors, that's going to be a huge issue that also helps when we can solve that problem for our seniors. It will also help with the rest of our society to have that access, and it will create a more affordable opportunity for all of us to be able to benefit from that as well. During COVID, we all came together to protect those who were vulnerable. And unfortunately, now we're seeing that, as things open up, we've sort of lost some sight of that. And so as a legislator and focusing on these issues is how it is that we can continue to bring in funding where we were seeing access to telehealth, where we were seeing access to other opportunities for seniors, including transportation. In our district, it's very hard to get from Cundio or even Chimayo to get into a hospital. And so that access to transportation is something the state can fund, and currently we're not doing enough. So as far as the continuum goes, there's more to do, including meal delivery. We were, again, during COVID, making sure everyone had access to 3 solid meals a day, and we've seen that that has not been a focus so much anymore. So what we're looking at, what we can do as a legislature, is make sure the things that work continue to work.
Thank you. And candidate Gross Close, how can we better support our senior population?
In the previous election, I was advocating one thing, and that was that we quit taxing Social Security. The people who have earned that Social Security paid taxes on that money before that was done. Then they've achieved an age where they were able to get that paid back. Now, our legislature did act to fund some of that, but they put a limitation. My position would be that all of that money has been taxed before, and none of it should be taxed by the state of New Mexico. We're one of the few states who still does that. So that is one thing that would help a lot in a lot of areas to continue on with that effort and show that we support our senior citizens at all levels, not just at some levels. Now, one of the things with the senior citizens that we have is in a lot of cases we have a lot of retired expertise out there. And people are retired not necessarily because they want to be entirely disassociated with what they worked their whole life on. I think what we need is a better ability to utilize the resources that we have in the community from the retired people. And right now there's very little in the way of being able to communicate with the people that are retired and to utilize the experience they have. Many of these people, they want to help their neighbors. They want to really contribute to their community. And as a state, we're just not doing a very good job of reaching them. That is one thing that we need to try to develop in the future.
Okay, thank you, candidates. We are now moving toward the moment for closing remarks. The closing remarks will be done in reverse order to the way we opened. We will hear first from candidate Grosclose, next from candidate Roybal, and finally from candidate Romero. You have 2 minutes for your closing remarks, so the timekeeping remains the same, but this is your choice on the last words you would like to share. Candidate Grosclose.
We did talk a little bit about the agricultural interests in the state, I grew up in Roswell, and when the air base was closed in Roswell, the agricultural community was the only thing that kept that community alive, that kept people in some sort of, a lot of people lost jobs, a lot of people moved out, but that was the main thing still, that agricultural community that kept the people being able to feed their families and to live their lives in a good and judicious manner. I think we need to make sure that we protect the agrarian interests that are in this state. We mentioned the acequias and things here. In my experience with the Interstate Stream Commission, we had a very successful low-interest program to loan money to acequias, and we also had grants that were given out by the legislature from time to time to acequias for construction of major things. I'm thinking of things like the rehabilitation of Santa Cruz Dam and restoration of Costilla Dam, among others in the state. So the state can be involved in a number of those issues that I have a lot of experience with. But one of the things that we must do in every case is protect the people and their access to water. You know, we can have all the affordable housing in the world, and it's not going to matter if we don't have water to put in those houses. So we're going to have to look at innovative new technologies to meet that need in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Grosclose. And next we'll hear closing remarks from candidate Roybal.
Okay, first I'd like to say thank you to the League of Women Voters for inviting me here tonight. I do appreciate it. I want to say thank you to my constituents that elected me to represent them for the last 8 years. And, you know, I'm going to continue to work hard, you know, and you know, I want to say thank you to my wife. And today's our 30-year anniversary, and I told her I'm sorry that it was scheduled tonight, but this weekend we'll go do something, I promise. And so, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, it doesn't always fall in place the way you'd like. So I do want to just recognize her and then recognize everybody that's supporting me on this campaign. I do want to say that, you know, I always work really hard in this position. I get like 40 calls a day from constituents, and I usually are calling in the evenings, returning calls, and I make sure that their voice is heard. I give out my personal cell number on the radio stations, and as soon as I leave the radio station, I get calls, 5 or 6 calls, and it's great because a lot of times it's smaller issues that we can handle pretty easily, and sometimes it's issues with the state highway, and I'll call Paul Brashner, who's the state engineer for our district, and I'll advocate on their behalf, plus I'll give them his number as well. So I don't just tell them call this person, call that person. I go above and beyond, and that's just the way I hold myself as an elected official and make sure that I'm here for all of my constituents. And I'll continue to do that. As a matter of fact, before I leave tonight, I'll go ahead and give out my personal cell number also. So if anybody would like to give me a call, I'm going to give you my personal cell number. This is 505-310-7587. And, I just look forward to working with you and representing you as I always have. And I appreciate the time tonight once again. And thank you all for being here, and you have a safe drive home. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Roybal. And now, Candidate Romero.
Thank you so much for sticking with us and for hearing about the future of House District 46. As your representative, it has been the honor of my life to serve this district. From growing up there to being able to actually walk the halls of the chamber of the House has just been a dream come true, truly, to be able to fight for the people of our district. I still feel that there's so much more work to be done. We had historic legislation passed in the past 2 terms, from cannabis legislation to water regulation legislation to helping our acequias, our land grant communities, our farmers, our ranchers, our entrepreneurs, and those who are still seeking to live the best life here in New Mexico. I love this state, and I think it has all of the potential in the world to be a world-class place that it is, but on the forefront of that comes great public policy. And so the work that still has yet to be done is in water. The people of New Mexico, in our Constitution, own the water of the state. We should protect it that way, and we should obviously resource manage that way. We have more to do in strengthening our healthcare our enterprises and making sure that we have adequate doctors and nurses and those who can help support the entire system of healthcare in our state. We have more to do to codify reproductive health rights and make sure that every single person who needs access to an abortion always has it in our state and will always be a safe place to do that. Our youth want to grow a future here. They want to sustain and thrive, and every single person who decides to live their life here should have an opportunity to succeed. And I'll do everything I can, from early childhood education to fighting climate change to making sure that we could create more sustainable industries in our state is our top priority. I've already had the honor to serve 4 years, would love to have another term to do so. I humbly ask for your vote and would love to be able to continue the great work out of House District 46. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I would like to thank 2 groups before we conclude for the evening. This is the end of our forum. And the first group I would like to thank is a very attentive and obviously interested audience. And I know that all of you are going to vote, because that's the next step in this process. So you're here to vote. The other thing I would like to do is to thank our 3 candidates. Their task is not an easy one. You put yourself on the line to run for public office, to serve your state, to serve your constituents. These are brave acts, good acts. We need you to do it. And now is the moment we can put our hands together and say thank you to you candidates. And with that, we are finished for this evening. And if you have any questions about registering, voting, any of that, the League of Women Voters is just all over the place in this room. Thank you.